So let's get started. So today what we're looking at is last minute UCAT preparation. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Anusha. I'm one of the tutors on the Medic portal. And so this is what we're going to be doing today in today's webinar. We're going to be discussing what we need to do as students who are preparing for the UCAT when we're very close to doing our actual final exam, the UCAT exam. So what we'll cover in today's webinar is how to prepare for the UCAT in a limited time, so maybe a few weeks or just 1 week even, how to maximize your use of question banks and mocks in this time, and also how to plan your time in the run-up for the actual test. Also, just as a little input from the Medic portal, we also have 15% off all Medic portal products with the code UCAT15, which you can use if you want any sort of extra guidance or support from the Medic portal. We have all sorts of things like courses and also individual tuition, which can be very helpful for preparing for the UCAT. So welcome for the Medic portal. We're UCAT strategy experts. We have lots of experience, years and years of experience of preparing lots of aspiring medics, over 40,000 aspiring medics to prepare for the UCAT, but not just the UCAT, but all aspects of getting into medicine, like interviews and personal statements. We've delivered UCAT prep in over 150 schools as well. And we're also partners of the Royal Society of Medicine. And we've got lots of great feedback in terms of how we support students to get the best possible UCAT score and feel confident and supported in doing so. So a key thing to remember about the UCAT is how high scores can open doors. A high UCAT score is important because it means the sky's the limit. It means that you have lots of options to choosing what medical school you can get into. You still have to be strategic with your application and not just choose any random medical school, because it's important to choose a medical school that you have a high chance of getting into. So even with a high UCAT score, it doesn't mean you can apply to every single medical school possible. It just means that there is more options and you can confidently apply to any UCAT university. However, as you may know already, there are lots of different things that are considered in terms of getting a place in medical school. So things like your interview, your A-level grades and GCSE grades and all that is also things that are considered. So it doesn't guarantee that you'll get into any university, but it does mean that there's a lot more options and you can be more confident in your application. And if you want more details on UCAT scores and like how to apply to different universities, what to consider, it's quite useful to look at our website, themedicportal.com, and then / with UCAT scores, because that is quite important to consider. If you've got a average UCAT score as well, it's not the end of the world, and there's still options for you in terms of other universities can choose, because not all universities have a extremely strong emphasis on the UCAT. Even if they are UCAT uni, there are other things they consider. So there are options for people who don't get as high of a UCAT score as they expected. When we're preparing for it in a limited time, it is a bit of a struggle because it risks a high level of cognitive load, which means that there's so much information and it actually makes learning less effective because our brain can't deal with all that information because it's all processed at once, and that's a very high level of cognitive load for the brain. So it's important when you are preparing in limited time that you need to have each session to be focused on one objective rather than everything at once, because that will be too much to take in. Try to make a plan that involves about 2 to 3 hours of preparation each day. When you are in the lead up to your exam, you may have heard from other people that it's really important that you really level up your practice and start practicing every day and hours every day. While it is important to practice every day, especially in the lead up to your exam, it doesn't mean you need to practice all day long, because you'll get tired and burnt out of it, and the extra hours you do may not actually lead to much more benefit to you. So try to stick to 2 to 3 hours with a singular focus each day, which will hopefully limit that high level of cognitive load and also make it a better and more efficient practice session for you. So what does this look like? Well, it basically means try to master one thing at a time. You've already had lots of practice with practicing questions in all different sections of UCAT. When you are in the lead up to your exam, it's still important to keep the practice because with any skill, it can be quite easy to slowly get a bit rusty at it or kind of get out of the hang of doing certain things. So do make sure that you are continuously practicing each section for UCAT, not just neglecting, situational judgment for a whole week, for example. So yeah, that's something to consider. You want to continuously practice all the different sections. Um, and try to master the content as you have done before, learning the tips and strategies to work through the questions and applying those to question banks. You don't want to worry about timing initially when you are practicing questions, but at later stages of your training, you need to include time pressure because that is the main thing that makes a UCAT so difficult. It doesn't mean you should have the strictest time pressure from the first time you're practicing the questions. You just want to start off with a quite easy time limit and then start narrowing it down until it's the UCAT time limit that you have for the question and try to see if you can work it out in that time limit and keep practicing that and doing that. And also try to see if you can master this kind of timing and doing the questions in time mocks because doing a few questions under time pressure is fine and it's good practice, but doing an actual mock is the most representative way of actually doing the actual UCAT, where you are not going to have a break and you're going to have to keep your focus for a long extended period of time. So it is important to practice mocks so you can actually get a feel of how it's like and how you can try to cope with the pressure of having to be focused and be able to manage your time in a longer period of time. You don't want to try and master everything at once because it makes it quite overwhelming and difficult. So try to first understand what's going on, apply your understanding to question banks, and try to consolidate your learning through looking at mocks and time mocks. If it doesn't go well the first time, that's fine. Everyone's first mock doesn't tend to go the best. And that's because that's the first time you've done it. So keep doing that and practicing it over and over again. You will see yourself improve. But also, if you don't see yourself improve, that doesn't mean you're getting worse because you can't get worse at the UCAT. It's a skill. It's a skill that means you build on it and you get better the more you practice. You can't technically get worse at a skill. You just get more practiced, and that's how you get better at the UCAT. So if you had done practice, you've done continuous practice for weeks and weeks already, then you are in a good position. You've prepared for the UCAT, and now it's just a last bit of preparing for the final exam. So the whole thing about preparing for UCAT is first understanding what it is, understanding the questions, the types of things that come up, and a variety of tips and strategies that you need to learn, applying that understanding of the theory to actual questions by doing question banks and consolidating it through doing mocks and keeping on track with all the different sections. So as I said, understanding is all about learning the theory. So that's important to first establish the understanding, then practice, because that's what makes you better. So if you're thinking about verbal reasoning specifically, it's the key thing here is learning the common tricks and how to combat these tricks that the UCAT writers will be trying to throw at you. So if you look at the medical portal website, we have a bit on, we mentioned a bit about things like dispersion and mitigation to use, and we also consider things like the use of outside knowledge and logical fallacies. If you want more information, that do go to the medical portal website, and we also discuss these things in UCAT tuition as well. Quantitative reasoning, the key thing to understand this section is to learn strategies for quick calculations, because all it means is using maths to work out problems. So if you're able to be as quick as you can with working out the mathematical problems, it will be a lot easier for you because then you can save a lot of time, and that's the main thing you want to be doing. Decision making is a very varied section. There's lots of different types of questions with this one. So it's the main thing here is critical thinking. and how to identify conclusions and shaky assumptions. So it's all about understanding how we can logically reason through these different puzzles, as well as understanding the key methods for each type of question, which there are quite a lot of variety of questions. So you will have to learn separate techniques for each of the different types of questions, from things like working through probability questions and syllogisms. Those are very, very different questions. So it is about getting used to those strategies. It's always theory first because with the UCAT, there is, a set number of types of questions and tricks that examiners will use. So if you are well versed in theory and understand the types of questions and the common things that they like to trick you on, then you will be aware of that. And when you actually do the UCAT, it's nothing new to you. So jumping into question banks without understanding of the theory is going to lead to a lot of trial and error and stress and feeling overwhelmed and sad. So it's important to know your theory. And even if you are nearing towards close to your exam, it's useful to go back to theory just in case, you have completely forgotten about it as well. So there are different ways you can learn theory. Sometimes people use things like one-day courses, but if you have a tighter timetable, it can be useful to think about, your own self-paced online courses. So what to master? So in terms of verbal reasoning, it's important to master what kind of tricks the examiners are using. So they're trying to catch you out and make it difficult for you. So it's important to watch out for the common tricks that they like to put into the passages. Things like identifying mitigating defensive words are really key to not getting caught out. With decision making, like I said, it's being familiar with the different question types because there is so many different types. So if you're familiar and have worked through them, then doing it in the UCAT is not going to be new and it's going to be a lot faster for you to work through them. Quantitative reasoning, it's really understanding basic maths. The maths in quantitative reasoning is honestly quite simple. It's not going to be anything complex, nothing to do with like A-level maths or any of that. So don't worry if you didn't take maths for A-level. It's mostly understanding the basic maths and how to work through this really fast. Everyone has their own methods, so whatever works fastest for you is the way to go. But at the same time, you need to learn basic formulas and conversions in your head. That can also make it a lot quicker if you can convert in your head really quickly and have memorized the basic conversions as well. So try to have a really good, solid, basic understanding of maths because that's what you're using to work out the natural questions. And situational judgment, people say you can't really prepare for this because it's all various scenarios, but you can prepare for it. For example, having an understanding of GMC's good medical practice is a really great place to start because all the values and kind of judgments that situational judgment is considering is a lot of it is based on GMC's good medical practice. What are expectations of doctor, expectation of good medical student, and so on are discussed in there, and is a really good basis to kind of helping you have a good judgment on the scenarios. Other things to consider are understanding medical ethics, things like and questions of capacity and consent are again useful to understand because they can help you answer the questions. So there is something that you can do to prepare for this if you can't. So, like I said, after you learn the theory, you want to move on to question banks. You don't want to just dive into it straight. You need to know the theory and then you go to question banks. When you're thinking about practicing with question banks, it's try to think about accuracy first. Don't worry about timing initially. The main thing is focus on getting the questions right. If you're getting lots and lots and lots of questions wrong, you need to take your time and see what are you doing wrong and how can I answer this question correctly. If you're getting lots of questions wrong, don't start on timed conditions because you're going to get more questions wrong. Start by trying to get at least 90% of the questions right and then start to include some time pressure and see how you cope with that. Try to have focus when you're practicing with question banks. With each practice session, try to focus on one part of the UCAT at a time. And like I said, even if you're doing that, just remember not to neglect the sections that you think you've mastered. Even if you feel like you're particularly strong with a section, for example, decision making, don't just stop doing the questions. You need to keep doing them regularly, because it's quite easy to get a bit rusty, and you can, it's important to practice them regularly to keep your memory fresh and, kind of get in the hang of it and keep that kind of skill. When to move on to mocks. So what we recommend is when you're focusing in applying your skills to the question bank, that is the main thing you want to be doing. Practicing questions on the question bank and not worrying about time conditions too much, and try to hit 80 to 90% accuracy. When you start introducing time constraints, and try to lower that, make it tighter and tighter until it's basically the timing of the exam, while trying to maintain your accuracy. So if you suddenly get 50% correct because you introduce a really tight time constraint, then maybe go back to loosening the time constraint and seeing what you can do to maintain your accuracy. And then again, after you worked on that, introduce a tighter time constraint, see if you can maintain that 80% accuracy. After that, you want to move on to timeless mocks, especially in the weeks before your exam. It's very important to do lots of mocks, because that is what the UCAT will be like, that exact timing and structure, and that's what you want to be very familiar with. It shouldn't be the first time doing it on the actual UCAT day, of course. If you'd like to, fairly early on, you can do a kind of diagnostic mock just to see how it's like, but most of the mocks you should be saving for the last bit of your preparation. In terms of consolidating, it's all about consolidating through mocks. It's the best way to consolidate your learning. Try to do the full mock in the time conditions. If it's a mock that's not with time conditions, it won't be as useful. So do it as you would do actual UCAT exam. Once you've done your mock, try to analyze your strengths and weaknesses. So if you see that you got lots of questions wrong in one section of the test, try to focus on that section that you were weaker at when you are going back to your question bank. When you are in your last few weeks of practicing for UCAT, doesn't mean you just do mocks. Of course, you do lots of mocks, but you also do your question bank as well. Especially after you've done your mock and you know what area you need to focus on, you can focus that through doing question bank questions. Yeah, like I said, best to do mocks in the run to your real exam, so like 2 weeks before. So next thing is how to plan your time. So if you've been preparing for several weeks or months even, don't overwhelm yourself. Like I said, keep to a couple hours practice a day, maximum 3 hours, I'd say. After 3 hours, you're just kind of, doing too much practice and kind of overwhelming yourself and not getting much more benefit. As I said, don't just do mocks. It's alternating between question banks and mocks. So question banks can help you focus your practice. Mocks help you get used to the actual structure of the exam and how you have to maintain your focus for a long period of time. So always remember to reflect on each mock. It's a chance for you to really see what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Read every explanation for every question you got wrong, as well as the questions you got right, because that can be really helpful to, see what's the right thing to do and what's the reasoning behind it. So you always want to be taking learning from every session, so you can really maximize that mock that you just did, and gain the most benefit out of it. In terms of the day before the test, it's important not to overdo it and probably not do a whole mock before it. The amount of benefit you get from last minute cramming on the very last day is not worth the stress. So instead, just do something you enjoy, eat well, get a good night's sleep, or try to get a good night's sleep, and just, relax. you want to be prepared for the next day, so you're not going to be, scrambling around, stressing on the actual day. So prep your bag, make sure you know where the test center is and get there in advance. And also make sure you have your ID, pack that in your bag beforehand the day before. So, that you don't have to stress about it on the actual day. So yeah, there's not much benefit in doing any practice on the day before the test. Just relax because you've done practice for a long period of time, and with a skill, you can't suddenly become better at it. It is a long period of time of practice that you've been doing that is the way you improve. In terms of final UCAT tips, it can be useful to think about keyboard shortcuts if you haven't already. It can help you save time because instead of wiggling around with a mouse on the screen, just pressing a button on a keyboard can be a quicker way to navigate the test. So if you want to review some questions, you can press Alt plus I for incomplete questions and then Alt plus V dash V for all flagged questions. And also when you're thinking about doing the questions, try not to get bogged down if you don't get a question or feel really stuck on it. If you are really stuck and you've run out of time, just flag it and move on. Don't get caught up on that question because it will impact the rest of the test. You want to make sure you reach the end of the test and reach it no matter what. So even if you have to guess some of the questions, then do so and finish the test. In terms of QR, look at the answer options because it's important to consider whether you can estimate or an approximate answer, or you need to be more precise. As estimation can help you save time, and often if the answer options are quite far apart, then it's perfectly okay to estimate. But if the answers are very close, answer options are very close together, then it's time to maybe use the calculator or work more precisely. But as much as you can, it's best to, be estimating most of the answers for quantitative reasoning as you want to be saving your time. In terms of where to apply, so now if once you do have your UCAT score, which people have questions on it, you just get it printed out. Right after you do your test, it gets printed out immediately and you have your score. So there's no waiting around for your results. When you have your score, what should you do? Well, you need to consider where to apply. Universities will use your score differently. So some will have a really high standard for a score, and if you don't have that standard of a very high score, you might not you might not be considered at all. But some other universities will use your score with other parts of your application and kind of look at it holistically. So what score is needed for medicine? There's not a single minimum UCAT score that you need to get into medical school. It is depending on the university, and they can really vary in how they consider their UCAT scores. So do research your universities that you want to apply to. Some universities will rank applicants by their score. So they'll be like, okay, this person got number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 100, 110. So you may get like a rank based on what you've got. So if you want to, if these kind of universities, you tend to have to score as high as possible to stand a chance. But some other universities have kind of like just a cutoff score. So if you get above this certain score, then you can be considered. So that's also an option for some universities. Yeah, so like I said, it's all varied. Some medical school rank you, some only consider top scorers, some have a curve score, and you'll be considered if you're above that curve score. But usually UCAT scores are viewed holistically, so it's important also to have other aspects of your application being very strong as well. So what does my score mean? So you probably know that the current UCAT is a bit different to previously. So prior to 2025, it was scored at 3,600, but now the abstract reasoning section is removed. So the total score is 2,700, and your performance is scaled on a score between 300 to 900, and then added together to get your overall UCAT score. So based on last year, where it was at 3,600, a score of like 2,780 maybe would be a good score, as it would put you in the top 20% of test takers. So that's a good score. However, there are some universities that have very high standards for UCAT scores. For example, Newcastle had an interview threshold of 2,940 last year. So even if you have a good score, you need to consider, does the university have a special threshold or something like that? Because even you got 2,780, which is a good score in the top 20%, it's still not give you an interview at Newcastle. So it's really university dependent. A score last year would be 2,523. That would be average. But now we need to consider the fact abstract reasoning is removed. So if we're considering an average score of being 2,800 from last year, this year it will be about 2,100. So that would be a good score for this year. At least that's what we estimate it to be. So last year there was almost 40,000 UCAT test takers, and the mean score was 2,523. So if we consider that test score in 2025 terms, we can see that the mean score would be about 1,870. So that's the mean score, the likely mean score for this year's UCAT. And in terms of mean scores in each subtest from last year, it was about 600 for each section, which would be probably the same for this year as well. You can see most people do worse in verbal reasoning because people tend to find that section harder, and it is reflected in the actual mean score. It is a bit lower than the rest. Yeah, so that's that one. Like I said, with UCAT, you can save 15% on our website if you want to utilize some support that the Bennett portal provides. You can always save money with our preparation packages, but if you use the discount code, you can get 15% off everything in our website, which includes things like the UCAT course, tutoring, and packages, as well as the complete package, which has UCAT and interview preparation combined. As you know, to get a place into medical school, it's not just the UCAT, you also need to prepare for the interview, which is very tough and competitive as well. And we also have a medicine summer school you can get a discount off. So using the code UCAT15. So now is the chance to do some Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask some questions on the question and answer part of the Zoom. So someone says my UCAT exam is on the 23rd of September. Do you know if it's enough time to prepare for it? I think that's enough time because it's just the 7th of August today. So you have a little bit less than 2 months, which is still a good amount of time to prepare for the UCAT. Someone asked, what do you recommend eating and sleeping like? What do you recommend eating and sleeping like before? I'm not really sure what you mean by this question, but I'm guessing you mean like the night before the test. Just, eat what you want to, eat your favorite food, and try to sleep 8 hours if you can. I know it's stressful, but try to just forget about the UCAT. Just have a calm, relaxing day before the exam if you can. Someone asked, is the score of 1,800 a good score to be getting 3 weeks before the exam? So yeah, that's good actually. That's fine. That's a decent score to be getting. You still have 3 more weeks left to prepare, and you've already got a score that's about the average score of the UCAT. So that's a good score, and you still have 3 more weeks to increase your score even more. So that's a good place to be at. I'm sorry to hear that someone's feeling quite demotivated. Yeah, it can be definitely quite demotivating to practice UCAT, and sometimes you don't see much improvement, and that can happen for some people. How do you inspire yourself when you're burnt out? Try not to, obviously, if you're burnt out already, it's a bit difficult, but try not to like overdo it with the practice. Um, you know, the main part of your practice where you want to be doing when you want to be doing hours a day is mostly when you're close to your exam. But if you're like more than a month before your exam, or then you don't need to be doing hours and hours a day. Just practice like 30 minutes a day. Try to do it every day so it's little by little because it's a skill, and a skill is something you learn over time. You can't just learn it all at once. So try to spread it out so you don't get overwhelmed and tired of practicing. Try to make it kind of like a game, like with decision making and all that. It's a puzzle. So you can sometimes make it a bit fun when you practice it. I know it's stressful, but it is a bit of fun. It's some questions, it's some puzzles. So that's a good way to think of it. A bit of practice, a bit of games to play. Um, that can be a way to think about it more positively, I guess. But yeah, it's not about overdoing it. It's practicing consistently, not all at once. So in terms of reviewing your UCAT exams, so when you're reviewing your mocks, first of all, just look at what score you've got, kind of see where that puts you. Is that does that put you in the mean uh, of the UCAT scores? Does it put you at a high score? So see where you're at, and where you'd like to be as well. So how much more improvement do you need to make? Um, Then you want to also consider the actual questions themselves. So try to see what questions you got wrong and right. Read through the explanation of each question, and see why you got the answer wrong and try to figure out why you got it wrong. So then you won't make the same mistake again. As you know, with the UCAT, there are a set number of question types. So the question types will just come up again and again and again, and they're bound to come up in the actual UCAT. So if you had worked on that mistake and understood where you got wrong and how to do it right next time, you're gonna get it right next time you actually find it in UCAT. So try to see that and work through your mistakes and how to do it. And yeah, people do tend to progress in their mock exams. A lot of improvement is made in the last kind of few weeks of preparing for UCAT because that's where you really do level up your practice to, maybe like a couple hours a day and do the mocks and then go and do focused revision with the question bank. So people do seem to get a decent boost in their score in the last few weeks. So someone said that they're finding that a UCAT score is not improving, even though they're trying to do questions in different ways. And you have 4 weeks left. So 4 weeks is a good amount of time. That's like a whole month. So you definitely have enough time to change your score. Um, a skill is something that is built up over time. So maybe you find out your UCAT score is not improving. Maybe you need to wait a bit longer, keep practicing and see, that maybe in the next 2 weeks your score will be improved. But also, if you're finding that you're doing questions in different ways, but it's not working, it might be that you just haven't fully learned the tips and strategies and techniques required to learn to find out how to do actual UCAT questions. It might be helpful if you're feeling really stuck to get some support with the UCAT. So the Medic Portal has a lot of support available from, UCAT packages and one-to-one tuition. You might benefit from that if you find that you're really stuck and don't know what to do and you feel like you can't improve. That might be a useful thing to consider. So someone struggling with verbal reasoning, how can I improve? The tips say to read the question, then find the keywords. This never works though. Um, Verbal reasoning is a tough one that a lot of people really, really struggle with, and it's completely understandable. It is one of the most time pressured one, and you have a lot of things to read. Um, just remember that you're not expected to read the whole passage. The UCAT writers know that it's kind of impossible to do so in the time provided. I mean, you only have about 2 minutes per passage, and you've got four questions. You can't read the whole passage in that time. So just remember, they're not expecting you to read the whole passage. The keyword approach is the way you want to be trying to find the answers, because through finding a keyword, you are basically narrowing down a passage to where the answer is. And so by doing so, you're limiting how much you have to read to find out the answer. So the keyword approach is really, the gold standard in terms of how to figure out the answers in verbal reasoning. One thing that some people don't do is have a look at the passage before they look at the question. So maybe it's something you want to consider. What I find quite useful is when I'm first faced with a new passage, instead of going to the question immediately and finding a key word, I go and look at a passage. I have a look at the first line of the passage to get an understanding of the topic, and then I quickly scan the passage in general. This doesn't take me any longer than 10 seconds, but through doing this, I like I said, gain an understanding of the topic and what each paragraph is in general talking about. This is helpful because it makes me feel more confident about the passage because I know what I'm reading, what it's about, and also it by doing so, I kind of get a blueprint in my head of what the passage is saying. So I know kind of what each paragraph is discussing. So then when I look at the question itself, I find a keyword and have an idea of where to look for the passage instead of just randomly scanning the passage to look for a keyword. So having a quick look at the passage before looking at the question in verbal reasoning can be quite useful, but not everyone does that. Someone asks, how many hours and weeks should you study for? It depends on what what kind of person you are. I would say in terms of how much time you should be studying for, like length of time, usually months is a good place to be in terms of preparing for UCAT. So at least a month, if not 2 months, can be a good amount of time to prepare for the UCAT. Obviously, when you're starting, you're just kind of looking at the theory and slowly doing questions, but not doing loads of practice. Then you start leveling it up as you go along and get closer to the exam. When you're actually like 2 weeks before your exam, maybe try to do a couple hours a day and do some mocks as well. But before that, you can just do like 30 minutes a day and just try to be consistent mostly. Yeah, I think so someone's asking how should I structure my daily revision? Should I aim for a full mock a day plus a mini mock? Um, you can do that if you wish to. It might be a bit much though, so consider like how long that's taking you. It can be useful to do a mini mock. Maybe try to do full mock and then reflect on the full mock and try to do some, focused revision on a question bank on what you need to work on. So on the day of VCAT, you are not allowed to write on your laminated book before the test starts. So you're not you have a blank paper or laminated workbook when you go into the actual test center. You don't write beforehand. So yeah. So if you're 3 weeks before your exam, um, how much time should you be preparing for a day? So yeah, I mean it really does depend. 3 weeks, it's fairly close to exams, so maybe think about doing an hour a day. but it doesn't have to be strictly an hour day. Like you can have the odd day where you don't do any revision because you have something to do or you have a family gathering or something of that sort. With the UCAT, it's honestly you don't have to be so strict. It doesn't have like exactly an hour, and you can miss a couple days. One day in a week you can not have done any revision, but it's just mainly the consistency over time. So always aim to study every day. And if you're 3 weeks before exam, you should be starting to level it up a bit. So maybe an hour a day. What tips do I have for quickly learning and understanding theory before trying question banks? So the Medic portal has really good stuff in terms of theory, and it's really well organized. So definitely go to the Medic portal website and look at the theory behind that and the UCAT there. That's really helpful. Um, and also things like 1 day UCAT courses are also really good. They're very packed and very full of information and theory, but it's a great way to get an understanding of theory quick in a very quick amount of time. Yeah, so sometimes people's UCAT scores do fluctuate, and that can happen a lot, and people get very disheartened when they see their UCAT scores going up and down. Like I've said before, the UCAT is all about skills. Skills don't get worse; they can only get better. So if your UCAT score suddenly gets a lot worse, it's probably not you doing worse in the UCAT. It might be that the selection of questions you've done just turns out to be not um your strengths. Maybe you just got a selection question that just doesn't suit you and you just did worse in them because you're worse in those type of questions. And or it might be other things like you might just be a bit tired that day and you're just not feeling up to it. So yeah, it's usually other things that cause fluctuations. It's not actually your own UCAT, verbal reasoning skills. It doesn't actually get worse, it really gets better. But don't feel disheartened, just keep practicing. And it's something that improves over time, like I said. So you won't see immediate change usually. It takes a bit of time. Yeah, you're right. Not all verbal reasoning have keywords as they're um in the questions. If especially like those kind of author perspective questions, most likely to agree with your correct. Those don't tend to be keywords. Um, you still don't have to read the whole passage. Because it is kind of impossible to do it. I think with those kind of questions, it's important to first, with questions that involve authors' opinions, it's important to read the first line and last line of the passage because the author tends to write the most important points at the beginning and end, because that's where us as readers tend to remember things better. In the middle, readers tend to forget the middle the most. So use that kind of knowledge to your benefit and have a quick read of the first and last sentence of the passage, which is where the author's strongest and most important opinions tend to be. And then you can quickly scan the passage, not read it, just give it a quick scan to see what's the author kind of talking about, what's the topic, what's their general perspective. And also, you have 4 questions on this passage. So by the time you've done a few questions, you will have a gist of what's being said and have read parts of it already from doing the other questions. So hopefully, by the time you get this question where it's like which of statements an author most likely agree with, you have a kind of general understanding of the author's perspective. In which case, you can read the different statements and see which one's most likely based on what you know about perspective and what you've read, which doesn't have to be the whole passage. Yes, you will be provided with pen and paper so you can write things down in the test centre. So for small details about the exam centre, I'm not sure. I mean, I remember being allowed to take water with me. But I'm not sure about the rules on snacks and stuff because yeah, so you might have to contact your test center and find out the details on that. So that kind of concludes our webinar today. Hopefully it was useful and yeah, that's it for today and hope you have good practice with your UCAT and best of luck with your actual test. Um, yeah, just believe in yourself, keep up the practice, be consistent, and try your very best. And that's all you can do. So good luck, everyone, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for attending, and bye for now.